Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm really glad everyone's joining us today. We have Nick Powills today from No Limit Agency, an 1851 franchise. And Nick put together some great materials and some great topics we're going to talk about. But the key really is accelerating franchise growth, startup franchise brands, emerging franchise brands. What are the steps we could take today over the next 12 months, 2 years, to really build momentum and reach that special position where you accelerate franchise sales? And as we go through today's webinar, my focus, or what I want to take out of this, is we know there's going to be franchise brands that launch, and there's emerging brands out there now. And if we go forward 3 years from now, what are the brands that really accelerated? They ignited their growth. What are the steps they took? And what's Nick's advice for all the brands today? How do we go from where we are today to being one of those special brands when we look back and see where you outpace the industry and build a successful franchise system? And I think there's a number of factors at play here, and we're going to dive deeper into them with Nick. And before I get Nick involved, Nick's the founder of No Limit Agency, 1851 franchise. For our clients and people that know me, I'm a really big fan of Nick and his team and the way that they have, in my opinion, changed the PR industry, how they're empowering their clients with the digital platforms they're producing, and really telling their brand stories. So Nick, thanks for doing this with us today.
Greatly appreciate you having me do it with you.
At the end of this presentation, Nick has given us a bunch of examples and brands that we're going to talk about and really dive into. But what I want to do in the beginning is just get into the basics, right? So for emerging brands, what are the steps that you should be taking now to build up your pipeline of future franchise sales? And what are some of the factors that you need to be considering as you plan out your franchise growth? So Nick, I know there's a bunch of things we discussed. I know you've discussed budgeting. So what's your thoughts? I mean, if someone's today, for those brands, we're putting together a plan to grow our franchise systems, what are the things we need to be thinking about right now?
Yeah, here's what I like about this slide. Anybody that's watching, or anyone that watches this in the future, you might see the $15,000 to $20,000 per deal number there at the bottom, and not pay attention to anything else and feel overwhelmed by this. The reason you're going to feel overwhelmed is you're going into a franchising industry underprepared. Doesn't mean you can't change your mindset now. It just means, unfortunately, as an industry, when you're out there soliciting, should I become a franchise or not? Access to information is somewhat guarded in the industry that we occupy. From an International Franchise Association perspective, the number that seems to come up at many of their events is $10,000 to $12,000 that you're going to have to spend per deal in franchise marketing. That's not agency fees. That is straight up dollars spent to market your franchise opportunity. What that means is at their numbers, if you want 10 deals in your first year being a franchisor, you better have set aside 100 If you take the smaller budget approach to getting your brand going, you are going to have a non-accelerated growth path, which then in many scenarios creates a level of disappointment because you assume that when you became a franchisor, or you assume as an emerging brand that it's as simple as turn on the lights and you're going to sell franchises. This industry is tough. It is not easy. You have to do things the right way if you want to win, or else you're going to be constantly disappointed. Charles, one thing you said in your opening statement, you talked about how can brands in the next 3 years become one of these accelerated growth brands? If I'm you, I look back previous 3 years. How many brands have accelerated that you've seen accelerate over the last 3 years? If you look in the rear view mirror, And there's not a lot. But the good news is fundamentals and budget. With those two things applied to your brand, you have a shot at putting together the right tools for growth. That was a long answer, but
no, look, a couple of things I think are critical, right? And I'm going to challenge some of this, and I think we're on the same page because you give some great examples. But first thing is there's far too many startup brands or emerging brands that don't budget or actually put together a business plan, right? They work with a development company, they work with a lawyer, they work with someone, and they're excited about franchising their business, but no one tells them, okay, now the next step is the really hard one, which is what's our plan over the next 12, 24, 36 months? What's our budgeting and how we're going to grow the brand, right? So by itself, this slide is critical for all those brands that aren't planning, right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest risks I see. We see startup and emerging brands, they've spent a lot of money, they haven't achieved traction, and it's usually because they didn't have a plan. It was just haphazard. So I get that. And I also get your point about being underfunded. But for everyone on this webinar, and I'm going to give Nick credit here, we also see brands that don't invest this money and they sell. We also know that if I go to an industry professional and say, okay, I'm in, I'm going to give you $100,000, guarantee to me 10 qualified franchisees, no one would ever do that, right? And of course, there's other factors like the roles of brokers. So as part of this webinar, I think it's important for everyone listening that understand budgeting is important, understand these numbers and metrics, I think are going to play a big role, but also understand in this webinar today, at least what I want to extract from Nick, because I've seen it, is how do I be the brand that's going to disrupt, whether I have the money or not, and how do I really build that organic interest in my brand where something's really compelling? And it may mean I have to spend $10,000 to $15,000, but I also think that there's a chance to really succeed and really accelerate if you follow other steps.
You know what brands don't need that money to grow? Ones that have a really good product, have defined their brand, their brand story, as you and I have talked about. But that is the exception to the rule. The reason these budgets exist is exactly what you said. They don't put together a business strategy. They really haven't owned marketing of a brand to create these raving fans. The reality is any startup brand that has growth, that doesn't have this financial risk that they're putting into franchise sales, because you could spend 20 and not get a deal. It's not like that's guaranteed. But what they have an incredible product. They've researched the landscape. Their unit does incredible volumes. So people see lines out the door. They know they're making money with it. And those two fascinations within the market end up helping that franchisor grow. So you can still be an exception to the rule. The reality is, though, because of what you said, the business plans are not well defined. And unfortunately, I get it. There are plenty of brands that think they have an amazing product, but when your volumes are not that of other opportunities, that you are competing against anyone that has a similar investment range as you, not just in category. If their unit level economics are stronger, you're already playing from behind. That's why that number can swing in either direction, especially emerging brand. You make a mistake on those first few franchisees, cost per deal is going to keep climbing because you're going to have to offset the loss that you have for poor validation when some prospect says, "Hey, Charles, would you buy that brand again?" And you're like, "I don't know." I mean, that instantly costs more money.
I think that sets the table really well, Nick, because as I went through, and we're going to go into this, but I love the focus on unit level economics, the validation, and really laying out the brand. And we're going to hit this more, but so it kind of works out for the emerging brands out there. Budgeting is key, but also look at this as a challenge in terms of capital and how to work around this. And even if you're spending this money, $20,000, Nick's right, you may not achieve acceleration, and it's going to be because of the reasons we're going to discuss over the next few minutes. So I get it, 5 deals, 100,000, but let's put that in the background and let's challenge that as we go. There's a ton of brands out there that are not prepared. And I see even bigger ones that you go to the franchise sales webpage, the distinguishing factors are 30 years of experience, training, and technical support, almost as if it were something generic that could apply to every business, right? So let's challenge on whether we have to spend 100,000 for 5 deals, or if we spend 100, could we turn it into 20? And I think the factors we're going to discuss are the keys here. Nick, what's your take on franchise brokers for emerging brands?
I want to answer that. Let me go back to the previous slide.
Yeah.
As I see this number here, here's the reverse model. Still, anything that our company can do, you need a Charles because you need to be legally sound as a franchise. That is like the must-haves. You do not need a marketing PR firm to grow your brand. So let's put that to the side. Let's say that's a nice to have. If you were to budget $100,000 and you look at your brand and you evaluate your leadership team, do you have enough? Your product, is it strong enough? Your cost to get in, how much can I make? And your validation, let's pretend that you have 5 franchisees. My recommendation is don't spend that $100,000 on trying to get more franchisees. Spend that $100,000 on making your first 5 more profitable, because at the end of the day, the number one sales item of any franchise brand is franchisees. Franchisees sell more franchises, period. So I think that's important to note, that it's not just go spend to get more. You should also look at spend to get better out of what you have.
I also think, not because you're on this webinar, I'm a big advocate, and you've done this for a lot of our brands. I like to see our brands spend time with a professional team before they launch or as they launch, really defining the unique elements of the brand as it relates to franchisees. And we'll talk more about the brand story, but I think that's almost as critical as anything else, because it's what you're going to live with over the next number of years. And Nick, because we're going to get to the heart, where I want to get to the real heart of this, which is brand story and accelerating growth, but you can't do it without talking about brokers for an emerging brand. And what's your take on that?
Here are the truths on the brokers. One, because of the way that each of these brokerages have been created, they've taken sales forces and dispersed it into a local level. That is a good thing. That means they have people in every market around the United States that are building relationships with people in that marketplace. And what they're driven to do, those brokers are driven to do, is secure those relationships so that when Nick or Charles say, I want to buy a franchise, Mr. or Mrs. X, they say, all right, now let me coach you. So the brokers have got spread that most likely your brand does not have. That is a good thing. A bad thing with the brokers, and it is a truth among many of them, that not all of them, but many of them, they will say to the prospect, I am a coach. In my opinion, there's a challenge in that, because they're not disclosing to the buyer, the person that might eventually buy your franchise brand, that they're going to get paid for this. You're also not disclosing to the prospect that you're not paying for it. They actually are, because in most cases, you're taking a prospect's franchise fee and just handing it over or filtering it to the broker. So in my opinion, I think there still needs to be some truths established with brokers, because if brokers are getting franchisees that are going to be successful, all for it. If brokers are trying to convince someone that might be interested in a senior care franchise to open a yogurt franchise, that's not right. That's not a right way to do it. But in the business that anybody that's listening to this is in franchising, you're not in the business of franchise fees. Those franchise fees should be used constantly to either get your units open and successful, or reinvest into the franchise development standpoint. So I hear brands whine about giving up their franchise fee to get a deal, but the reality is the money that you're going to make off royalty is significantly higher than that. And let's not stop there, because in a world where private equity is buying up brands, the value of a franchisee that's driving revenue back to you is even greater than the royalty that's coming into you, because upon exit, you're going to get futures on whatever that franchise owner is. So I think for whatever reason, the industry has devalued the process, and we focus on these franchise fees as a revenue source when the reality they're not. And the brokers still have value, but it's another tool that you can't just set it and forget it. Like, you have to make sure that you're protecting what's coming into it. Yes, there is a risk in today's broker world that they say, hey, Charles, talk with Nick. Charles like, Nick's not the right fit for me. And now that broker blacklists you because you said no to them. Don't be afraid of that. Stay true to your brand, because it will keep coming around when you're true to your brand. So my end headline or statement with brokers is they can be a great asset if you use them properly, you incentivize them right, you educate them right, and you put guardrails on who you're willing to let into your system.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And especially your point to franchisors, if you're dealing with a quality broker, and there's many out there, more often than not, they bring qualified franchisees. And as you've said, the real game for emerging brands is to get that validation, with those quality franchisees. And I agree. In the long analysis, the paying that broker commission is a good opportunity cost for bringing on good franchisees that are going to validate. So
they have the exposure to those franchise prospects in the local markets that you don't. That is where the good value proposition is.
So basics here, and we're going to get into it more detail. Naturally, you need your franchise website, but again, I have a hard time with so many brands. I don't see anything unique about their franchise sales. I mean, it's just generic that you'll train me and I'll get a territory, and maybe I'll have all these numbers tell me how much money it costs to open up a franchise. What's your recommendation, at least where brands should be focused on their franchise sales website?
Yeah, so let's take a step back. I think if you look at the history of the franchise website, it started as an extension of the consumer site, where basically you could just go and fill out a form, and then a salesperson would call you. Then it turned into, there was this craze where it was like basically a locked PowerPoint that franchisors felt that they could put locks in place before you captured more information. You had to do X. So then they turned into this protective information standpoint. That didn't work so well. But now we're at least in a place where it's a separate URL so that you can look at data differently. You can put tracking or retargeting against something in a more concise way. But what you said, Charles, is so critical. Without a clear message, you're going to struggle. And without the understanding that majority of the incognito leads activity happens away from your website should just be an information toolkit to guide the prospect on how to go start researching your brand. Yes, you need to define the why you and why now, but it is not going to be the be all end all, because now today's prospect is much more sophisticated in that they're going to take their time to buy. The economy is good, so I have no pressure or trigger moments that's going to force me to buy your brand now. I'm going to do my homework, and when I'm comfortable, I'm going to inquire. The prospect wants to inquire in different ways today. It's like any of us, if you just put yourself in your own shoes and be like, when you're looking at buying a car, which is not a big life decision compared to buying a franchise, if you could just say, text me information on this car versus getting hounded by some salesperson that's calling 25 freaking times. Well, some buyers want the passive approach. They want to talk to you when they're ready, and sometimes they're just looking for information. So the evolution of the website has been so valuable to franchising, yet so few can actually come out of the gates and say, here's the why us, here's the why now. And yes, we're comfortable with either communicating with you in multiple ways, or you going around the web and coming back and feeling comfortable about your decision to talk to us about the possibility of owning our brand.
Nick, your points about why us, why now. I think so many brands just spend money on marketing dollars, whether with agencies, and no one takes the time to roll up their sleeves to really sit down and develop and communicate the why. right? And to me, that analysis of what's unique about the brand, that's something that lives on. So right in this slide, we're looking at Mighty Quinn's Barbecue, which I think is one of the better, or one of the better startup emerging restaurant brands, right? When you look at Mighty Quinn's, what do you see as their why and their why now?
So I mean, they're saying, look, fast casual urban barbecue is their focus. Okay, so there's the keywords. Now they have to describe what that means. So what they're saying is we took chef-driven product, moved it to the front of the house so that the consumer experience is in line with a Chipotle, which has shown us time and time again, whether it's frozen yogurt or Chipotle or salad, that down the line, or pizza down the line, seems to make sense because the customer likes being in charge. They want to tell you how much they want, and they want to see the product coming out. That's the current world of the customer. They're in urban settings, which means a lower square footage footprint. What is valuable about that? Well, they've integrated in tech by understanding how to deliver their product through third-party apps. What does that mean for the real estate, and why is that essential? They're able to shave off the space of their building because they know a percentage of those seats are in people's homes. So they're not inside their four walls. So when you look at what they've done, they've basically taken tech, chef-driven, the real estate and build-out strength, because they've nailed it in New York City, where the square footage is less than maybe the suburbs of some of the communities that we live in. So they've delivered that brand experience. And then you look at the extensions of brands don't sell, brands people do. Because of the chef-driven, they have an executive chef who's a celebrity, who happens to be a celebrity chef, that is putting his stamp on this brand. So now you've established the human connection. So you can't see all of that here, but this starts the guideline of describing the why them, and why now is they're disrupting the category. The why now typically turns into I can open where I want to open. There are people that say, man, I had an opportunity to open McDonald's in my community. I should have done it. Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So that what they're saying is, we have a feeling that we're going to carve this out with top level developers or operators. Understand that territory is going to be limited. So from them establishing that, I think all of the above is done through the way that they're telling their story.
Again, the why is going to lead everything, it seems to me, for years.
Wait, Charles, there's one other thing I want to say on that, and you know, it's kind of tied to the next slide too, but the next buzz term, and it's coming up, but it's not very clear, is persona targeting. But the next extension to this, and this is something that we've been talking about for years. If you know your why you and why now, and you know your targets, and you've budgeted properly, then that combination should give you a good business strategy to go forward. So now you're going to hear this persona targeting. What is a persona? A persona is an identified category of human that would likely buy your brand, because then your marketing gets smarter. You could take these guys. They could start, for argument's sake, because they have an executive chef. One of their personas could be executive chefs who want to own their own businesses. So now when you put an executive chef talking to executive chefs, the message resonates more, and you have a higher likelihood of actually making those marketing dollars work well. So that's going to be the next buzz term, is identification of persona, so that when you're spending dollars on marketing, you're dialing in your focus to be very direct on who you are looking for. It's like Match.com. Eventually you start putting in the filters, and you know what person of that you're looking to have a relationship with based on the personas that you've targeted them down to. It's the same mentality here. The closer you can get to what you want, the better likelihood you have of putting the right message in front of them, as long as your brand matches with that persona.
Is it all really a function of the advancement in terms of social media and targeted marketing, and what could be done in terms of targeting different audiences?
Partly, but I mean, think this is a very wide comparison. But think of like the church. I mean, you look at the segmentation of the church on how different churches have different versions of God that you believe in. That means their persona development was specific to people that would believe in the things that they believed in. So it's been around forever. It's segmenting out a population and determining which ones are most likely to interact with your business. So you could date back to how the church grew their communities within a community. It's always been there. But yes, with today's technology, it makes it a lot easier to find those targets or those lookalikes that you're trying to go after.
You can't take advantage of this unless you know your why, which it's interesting because if you don't know your why and don't spend the time on your positioning of your brand, it's also very likely you're not building out your strategic planning on how to grow that brand also. So they go hand in hand, and it's interesting because to me, on the outside looking in, I'm taking this as if I know my why and I really dive into that, I could really take advantage of opportunities and be more flexible than just being a generic brand that has very generic attributes.
Hit that for 1 second. So the why thing, I mean, this has been another buzz term that comes up. Simon Sinek does his presentation on the why. The problem is nobody's out there telling people how do you define your why. And when it comes from just you being like, here is our why. No, you cannot define your why. Your customers define your why. Like, but nobody's given brands a pathway to actually understand how do you go figure this out. And the why, the reality is the why is nothing new. Simon Sinek figured out a way to tell that story. The why has been the vision of any brand forever, but it is clarifying that message and delivering it out there. But again, I think part of the challenge is brands don't understand how to get to the why. And that's an issue because all of the stuff that we're throwing at you, if you don't know how to get there, good luck.
It takes a ton of time to get to that why. It takes effort. And the acceleration is in large part going to come from franchisee validation. I mean, that has to be a critical cornerstone, no?
It's probably the most important. I mean, yes, you need to have a brand that's franchisable, and given there are plenty of consultants that will franchise anything. So that's not really a guardrail thing. You could franchise it. You could say I'm a table cleaner in offices, and some consultant be like, yeah, we could turn you into a franchise. Right. So in my opinion, that there's not barricades or blocks of entry. But if you screw up on your franchisees and they're like, nah, I wouldn't buy this. Leadership they don't listen to us. They don't know what they're doing. Right. My costs are rising. They're not communicating with us. One hiccup.
Or I even startup brands that have a couple of franchisees and want to sue them.
Great, crazy too.
Yeah,
guys invest their life savings into your brand and you want to sue them? Dumb on. You said yes to them in the first place. It is not just their fault that you want to sue them. It is yours. You made the decision to say yes. You made errors in that process, right? So these franchisors that the blueprint's already been created. None of these big brands got there without doing this and following this blueprint. It's not hard to follow the blueprint if you're willing to follow the blueprint.
Yeah, and just tying this back to your earlier points and strategic planning and brand planning, part of that planning as an emerging, or at least for the startup brand, should be, okay, once we bring on those 10 franchisees, how to make sure they're completely successful and be our brand validators. And for a lot of our clients, what we discuss is those 10 are going to determine how quickly you get to 25 and then to 50 and then to 100. And if you can't validate with those 10, that's a problem. So I'm on board with that. And another thing, a pet peeve of mine, if you're an emerging brand and you're speaking to litigators, I understand, right? We represent emerging brands. Lawyers like to sue, but I don't recommend, unless you're protecting your trademarks and your brand, lawsuits at early stages of your franchise development are not good, and they really should be avoided. But it's just something we're seeing more and more. And I think emerging brands need to navigate away from litigation at these early stages. Long-term success, winning long-term, this is, and it's interesting because you picked out a couple of key metrics here, and I think it's important for everyone to understand long-term success. What should franchisors be evaluating at the economic level?
Well, let's again redefine why people buy. This is you. This is me. This is anyone on the webinar. I believe in the product. I believe in the vision. I like the cost to get into it. It matches with what type of capital I have access to. I can make the money that I think is fair. And that's not just buying into the average unit volume, which I'll talk about in a second. Validation, people seem to say this was a good investment. I mean, this is any widget. It's not just franchise. This is anything. So when it comes to successful unit level economics, here's my top advice. One, when you're looking at these item 19s and look at average unit volume, if you're going into business thinking you're going to be average, don't buy it, period. Like if you're an average human being, franchising is not for you. So if you're going into it and being like, what if I do lower? Don't buy the franchise. Like, this is just a guideline of what some franchisees have made. It's not guaranteeing you that you're going to make that money, because at the end of the day, as a franchisee, you better follow that model. If you feel like you're looking at this model of how the franchisor operates and it's not filling or doesn't support what you envision, don't buy that brand, because you're buying a system. Then it's about shaking hands and kissing babies. If you're unwilling to get out there and be interactive with your community, you're not going to get the volumes unless, exception to the rule, that you really nail the real estate, depending on what widget you're selling. But if you're looking at a business and thinking you're going to be average, you're not going to succeed. Now, for franchisors, that's important to scope out here when you're looking at the unit level economics. That one, for prospect standpoint, if they're looking at average or they're asking questions more about the average or the bottom, they're not coming in here thinking they're going to be at the top. And again, we already talked about this, but royalties is where you're going to make the bulk of your money. You want high-performing franchisees. You want people that are coming in like, I'm going to be number one in the system, or asking questions of, tell me about what it would take to be one of the top 5 in your system. How long does that take? What are some of the signs of a successful franchisee? So you got to, there's a million things going on, but you have to scout out those answers in order to win. But at the end of the day, if your franchisees aren't making money, you will not be a good franchise, period. So if any of you on this webinar are looking at your brand and you're like, yeah, our franchisees aren't making money, you might be able to trick enough people to buy your brand. But remember, these guys are investing their life savings into your company. It is irresponsible of you not to invest in the unit level economics of your franchise owners.
Yeah, and Nick, tying it back to that earlier slide of spending $10,000 to $15,000 per franchisee, and tying it to your first 10 franchisees are important. We've all seen, if you take care of those two elements, meaning you onboard the right franchisees, they're doing very well unit economically, and you have a great item 19, all of a sudden you start accelerating in the franchise sales process, and you're not spending $15,000 per prospect. So this stuff just comes together, and unit level economics are, especially item 19 for these emerging brands with strong item 19s grow. And if the item 19s in years 2, 3, and 4 include great franchisee data, I think that's where a lot of magic happens. So, this is critical. Royalties, I get it, right? And again, back with brokers, your point, I think, is you're building out your system to build up your royalty stream.
Yeah, that's the value of a broker. If they have access to people that are willing to buy, or are qualified and ready to buy now, then they can help you get your royalties going. Really, the first winning moment for any startup or emerging brand is the moment that your royalties are paying you enough to handle your business. And then after that, now you can grow and build upon that. I already said this, but the value of a franchisee is not the franchise fee. That's irrelevant. It is the royalty and the futures that franchisee is worth upon exit. So yes, it's all about the royalties for you, but that should also encourage you to help your franchisees make more money, because those franchisees make more money. What happens? They buy more locations, make more money, pay you more money. Like this is so simple, but it's so backwards in franchising. People don't look at it the right way, unfortunately.
Well, but I think I think you're laying a good framework, right? You launch your franchise system, you focus on your first 10 franchisees, focus on unit level economics, you grow the royalty stream, and then at a certain point you look for acceleration or even more fuel with private equity and different levels of capital. So I think it's important for emerging brands to realize that royalties are the key. This is interesting. We discussed this earlier, and I'm like, what do you mean by willing to change for emerging brands?
Yeah, so the true statement is don't get blockbustered. Blockbuster had a moment, and I was telling Charles that I would love to have been a fly on the wall at this board meeting where you have these high level executives who are seen arguably the smartest people in the world, and someone comes in with, "Hey, what are we going to do about this Netflix that is mailing out DVDs?" And they're like, "No, the studies show people are willing to still go into the stores." All right, well that meeting didn't go so well. Next meeting, oh no, this Netflix is starting to stream online. What are we gonna do? That will never work. All right, good night, Blockbuster. And it's happened with other brands, many well-known brands that any of us grew up in our childhoods that just disappear. And you look at the reason, it's the lack of adaptation. That if you're stuck in your ways, it's going to be hard as a franchisor. The franchisors that are flexible or show flexibility are the ones that win. You think about McDonald's. McDonald's was great burgers, great fries, great shakes. That's it. You look at McDonald's today, it's expanded. You look at things from McDonald's that have gone away, like even the playgrounds that they connected to the buildings that they thought, that's the way that we get children and moms in here. I mean, things change, or their flexibility. Maybe their cafe goes away if Dunkin' continues to swallow up more market share and can deliver a better product for cheaper. But you can see with the McDonald's, they are willing to flex. As long as that flexibility continues, they will continue to find out ways to be a good brand. So my advice here is, wherever you're at today, even if it's the way that you've done things, be willing to listen to ways to put adoption into what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you don't, then I'm going to say on a future webinar that I wish I could have been a fly on the wall of your wall because you let someone else come in there and disrupt your business.
I think you got some good examples too coming up, Nick. So one issue I have, and we talk a lot about this with emerging brands. And again, I keep going back to developing the positioning, developing the why, the brand story. And then the question becomes, what's the role of PR? And one of my issues is that, especially for the emerging brands where capital is critical, for me, it's tough when you just pay a monthly fee. It's pay to play. I pay money this month. I get some PR. It goes great. You know, I joke around with my clients. I don't say this to you. Then I don't get PR, and then I complain to my PR agency. I get some PR, and then I stop paying them, and all my PR goes away. And I feel like it's not a reusable asset. But I know, so what's your take on where PR is and how it's changed and what brands need to know or how to use it?
Yeah, so let's start with here are some of the false statements that exist from other PR firms, and not just in franchising, period. PR is not lead generation, it's lead awareness. Lead generation happens from everything else, like your websites, your validation. That's lead generation. That's going to generate your leads based on the experiences that they have away from that PR moment. That PR moment is top of the funnel, introducing them to the fact that you're a franchise brand. So if you go into engaging with a PR firm thinking that you're going to sell franchise deals off of it, yes, maybe will it produce some leads that may turn into franchise deals? Absolutely. Go into it with the right mindset that PR is awareness. You have to understand how PR is shifting. It's starting to intersect even more, where advertising and editorial used to butt heads tremendously at every form of place that you could buy advertising in the media world: newspapers, radio, TV, online. But now that intersection's getting a little bit more welcoming because the advertising side knows that they're going to lose their job if they don't drive advertising dollars to editorial that is going to drive people to want to interact well. It's the persona targeting we talked about. So because of this, newsrooms are laying people off, they're shrinking, they're freelancing. So the whole climate is shifting. Oh, and then you throw on this buzz term, influencer marketing. We're all influencers. We've all been marketing other brands. We'll tell you, like, Charles, I really like your jacket. He's like, I bought it at Nordstrom. Here's the type of jacket I bought. Like, that's influencer marketing. It's been around forever, but now this new buzz term is coming up that is also disrupting PR. Oh, throw on content marketing as a disruption of PR. But the reality is, in my opinion, PR is all of that. PR is marketing, PR is advertising, PR is digital, PR is social. It's all under a PR umbrella. We just haven't shifted enough to actually call a spade a spade. So PR is shifting. If I'm you as an emerging brand, don't put all your eggs in that basket. You would be crazy to do that because it's going to be a combination of all those things that work. Set your right expectations and then do something with the PR that you earn.
Early in the franchise development process, we talk to our clients about what's next, right? So what I feel like they need to be aware of is, okay, we're developing your franchise system or we're working with your franchise system. Let's evaluate or think about what's our franchise sales pipeline 6, 9, 12 months from now. Because what we do now is what's going to happen. And a lot of times I even advise our clients, I'm like, look, we're at a development stage on the franchise and we're going to launch your franchise in a week or two. And maybe we don't engage PR or traditional PR, but I think it'd be very worthwhile to work with someone like Nick and his team to get the why down, to get their perspective on how they see the brand, how they see the brand fitting in the franchise spectrum. And my statement to them and my belief, a sincere belief, is that positioning could help us with so many other things. It becomes a renewable asset. It's going to live on our website. It's going to get into our franchise sales materials. It becomes part of our vocabulary as we speak to prospects, and it becomes everything we do. So my point is, even if you don't have the budget to do PR, I think it's important to spend time and money to get that brand positioning down. And then, which gets to the other point, I guess, is this slide, which is it needs to live and it needs to be reusable.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all forms of content. The reality is PR, blogging, articles, social media. It's more about what you do with it than what happens in that moment. It's the credibility that comes alongside that. I think you guys do a great job of taking things, even this webinar. You take a webinar campaign, how do you distribute that? That goes out through a newsletter, that goes up on your social, you hand it off to people that are gonna promote it. So you campaign around a singular idea. The same is true here, is that if your single concept is, I got an article in Insert newspaper, the NJ Biz, it's not just that you got in there once because you're going to be restricted by how many people saw it in that moment. It's that you take that and you distribute it through your newsletter, on social, same thing that you did with this webinar, so that you can expand the life of that piece, because you have the influencer marketing piece. You have the NJ Biz saying that you're a valid franchisor. Now do something with it. And far too often brands miss the opportunity to do that. In a world where we are all content creators, we are the media, you also have the ability to answer some of the questions that may come up in the sales process on your tools that exist, social or your blog, or using an agency to distribute it. Answer some of the issues that may came up. You hear a franchisee said, I wish I would have come to the table with more capital. Then you create counter content that says, how much capital should you come to the table to open insert brand? So this model, again, none of this is genius. It's just fundamentals of communicating to make sure you're setting your brand up for the best shot, and then packaging that all together and trying to leverage it to get in front of more people that might have interest in working with your brand.
Nick, and it's interesting too, because if you just go the traditional PR route, what I find is you may get that NJ Biz article, but it's not talking about the right things. The article it's just a generic article, and it's not talking about those whys, and it's not focused on the transformation for franchisees, which again, my issue is when brands spend money, all of a sudden they hire agencies and they're doing pay-per-click ads or getting NJ Biz articles, but no one figured out the brand positioning first, because I think that's the most difficult thing. And what I do like about 1851 is the ability to start telling that story over time. And that story is going to evolve. Even from a franchise team perspective, you're not going to have that story fleshed out, in one shot, but it's going to be the evolution of that brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not going to say that we're the be all end all. I certainly believe that we have a model to get to your why better than any agency exists. Part of the reason is because of that statement that I made before, that brands don't sell brands, people do. So therefore, to take a new franchisee signing on, 99% of agencies, the story that they pitch out there is new franchise signs on. And so a tiny little brief runs in the newspaper, doesn't have a lot of impact. Versus my approach is, well, we're pitching these stories to journalists. Journalists are humans. Their form of art is in the written form or in TV form. We got to give them a story that is human interest so that they're excited about the piece of content that they're going to actually go create. So when they get involved with the interview and say, oh, that's pretty cool, Nick. Before you were owner of a PR firm, you were a journalist. That's interesting. Oh, what's that? You covered the Cubs and Sox for a summer before that and interned at Rolling Stone. And you start pulling out what the human interest story is behind me that other people would be like, oh, that's fascinating. No, maybe I could start a PR firm too. So all the shift is that brands don't sell brands, people do. I'm very fascinated with the difference between Sony and Apple. Sony as a brand had this guy, Nobu Toski, who created the Walkman, the camcorder, and the digital camera. So 3 inventions that are in this thing now. Steve Jobs took all those, put them in this thing so it sits in your pocket. But what Apple did and Sony didn't is Apple put Steve Jobs front and center. So always there was a relatable visionary at the front of it versus Sony saying, look at our product, look how great it is. Doesn't make Sony a bad brand. It's still a good brand, but it's not a great brand. And now what's super fascinating about that connection is they both died in 2011. They both die the same year. These 2 incredible founders die, or visionaries die, in the same year. And if you Google Nobu Toski, you won't see anything. So it's the fundamentals of how you tell the story to that NJ Biz, that if it's just, look, we signed another franchisee, that might not be as sticky as it should be. So you're wasting time and money to go through it.
Yeah, and that brings up another interesting thing. And I think you have a slide in there too, which is founders and team members are critical for success. It's interesting too, because, a founder, especially on the emerging startup level, a founder that immerses himself or herself can make all the difference in the brand. So we've talked about story a lot, your why. I think here's some good points. And, you're saying humanize your story. And my question to you, we have an example here, Muya Burger. How do you humanize burgers?
Yeah, so you get a mascot outfit as a burger and you stand in front of yours. I'm just
right.
No, I mean, we've talked about this. The reality is the cool thing about franchise brand is humanizing a brand is not hard. It's built within your franchisees. That all these franchisees had to have done something in their life to get to the point of being able to buy a Muya. So the humanization of a brand comes from putting franchisees front and center and letting them talk about their life story before they got to the point of opening a franchise brand. And the reality is, again, to get to the trigger moment of buying a brand is pretty challenging. So they've done something. So you extract that. If you don't have franchisees, then it's pretty cool that you're even deciding to become a franchise, because that means you are a small business owner. And that means you do feel that you've created something that has a shot at being duplicated, whether or not we've dove into it or not. You have that belief that you have something that can be duplicated. So the humanization of a brand is fairly simple, especially when it comes to a franchise brand, because there are so many stories of human interaction and cause and pain that would really resonate with buyers, both through advertising and through editorial?
I mean, and it wasn't on here. One story that sticks with me is one of our clients is a large construction franchise in Australia, right? And the story that stuck with me so much, and they're a big system, green, eco-friendly home construction, come to the U.S. market, and I'm sitting with the founder, and we're having lunch, and I'm just blown away by his story, which was, we were in a town, and again, I'm paraphrasing, and company's Green Homes, and they're amazing. But the founder's telling me a story how he was a builder, and I believe his town got they had a gold rush there, modern day gold rush, which you would think would be good, but that attracted larger builders, and so that hurt his business. And then he took a shot with probably the last couple of dollars he had, built a spec house all on green principles, and then won awards, and then people asked him for advice, and then sold ebooks, and that led to probably one of the largest home construction franchises in that country. And I'm always compelled with those stories.
What's the boilerplate for that brand?
What do you mean boilerplate?
What is their boilerplate of what they are?
I don't know. What are you saying it should be?
The story that resonated with you had nothing to do with their brand.
Oh yeah, great point.
The challenge of a human being that had to fight through their last dollar to get to a place of being able to tell a great story. I mean, that I was making my point that we think that brands are more valuable than they actually are. There's two things. One, again, the people side. That's truth. And two, your customers don't give a shit about you. They care about themselves. And if you give them a reason to care more about you through themselves, you got a shot at winning.
Right. That brand, Green Homes, I'd follow their founder into battle, right? I mean, and I'd feel confident in investing. And which gets to the point, which is your brand story is about your franchisees and your customers, and not about your great technical training or 30 years of experience.
Right.
This is, this is an important point you're making here too. So, just hit this one, Nick, in terms of perspective here.
I could talk about this for 2 hours. I'm going to limit it to 2 minutes. Holy smokes. All these franchise salespeople are forced to try to sell widgets. No, you're investing your life savings into owning a brand. This is not selling a car. It is not selling a phone. It is not selling a pack of gum. Yet for all these brands that try to sell, they try to treat it that way. We are not selling used cars here. We are selling a life decision where your life savings goes into something that you believe is going to create more wealth for you and and maybe more balance for your family. That's a big deal. But yet franchise sales has been simplified down that if I spend X, then I better get Y. No, it just doesn't work that way. So please, any emerging brand, understand that you're not selling these widgets that are cheap and disposable. You are making life decisions, and that's even bigger than buying a home. This is a big freaking deal. And when you change your mindset to think that way, then when you're creating your process to get to how am I going to award franchises, not sell, you got a shot at winning. That's my 2-minute rant.
Well, and I love the headline, Life's Big Moments Start Here. And by the way, this is another example of putting all the pieces together for success. You're talking about Big Blue Swim School in terms of capitalization, bringing in an amazing management team, and really focusing on that positioning. So, but that's a killer headline over there too. But I think, Nick, you've done justice to this, but it really is important to have that mindset, right? Because it changes how you look at everything as an emerging franchise brand and as you approach all these franchise sales and all these marketing channels.
Well, and it's not just emerging brands that are going to battle with this. Look, the big boys, I have a client right now. It is week to week. We're not getting enough leads. There's not enough leads. There's not enough leads. I'm like, don't you want deals? Well, yeah, I want deals, but I want to talk with people. Okay, but you only engage us for one component. It's not me that's going to make this work for you. And then you start unpacking, where does that frustration, where is it boiling up from? You got some CEO that is like, we're going to get 30 deals this year. Like, all right, good number to throw out there, I guess. How many did you do last year? 12? Okay. How many the year before that? 8? Okay. What is the most you've ever done? 20? Okay. So the budget that you did 20 was what? It was $200,000. All right. So $10,000 deal. That makes sense. So you get your 30 this year. You're going to budget what? 50. 50 what? 50,000. So let me get this straight. You're going to lower the budget. You're going to increase your expectations. You're sizable, so you've already sold out of key markets. Huh? And it's so like illogical to me, but it happens with all these big brands that someone in the C-suite, like, it's like when you used to spin the globe, where am I going to travel this year? And you put your finger on that. That's how they determine what is their growth goals. So being realistic with understanding how it works and then being realistic with expectation is so important, because there is no magic trick in franchise development. It's just about doing all these fundamentals and basics as best as you can.
Oh, so Nick, this is fun. So biggest mistakes you see franchise brands making?
Bigger than that. You're buying from people. You're buying the vision. You're buying everything that we've talked about. It is so much larger than some fancy building that you have. And hey, by the way, Amazon and Grubhub are going to disrupt the hell out of your building that you built if you're in food. And even in retail, it's all changing. So that beautiful building you had, you better have a point of view on how you're going to make that home based at some point, or decrease your restaurant size down so it's limited seating with an awesome kitchen that takes the product into people's homes for a good value. But the reality is they sell the wrong thing. Brands don't sell a brand, people do. Do you want to be Sony or do you want to be Apple? I mean, chances are you would be fine being either one of those. But in the comparison, you want to be the great one. You can think about Gatorade, like Mike. I mean, it's been done a million times. Dos Equis, a relatively unknown beer company, puts the most interesting man in the world in front of everyone, and then all of a sudden you're like, I want to have a Dos Equis because when mosquitoes bite me, I turn into Superman. But the reality is, like, all these things have been laid out already. Nothing. I'm not saying anything new. It's not like I've discovered the fountain of youth. All I'm saying is be fundamental with this stuff. Understand the same way that you're going to buy is the same way that your franchisees are going to buy.
So, but even in this ad, I mean, Sobowls is focused on lifestyle and franchisee, right?
Sure.
So they're not focused on the product itself. They're focused on the transformation for their franchisees.
The emotional return, yeah.
By the way, I mean, I'm biased, but that's another team that lives and breathes concern out of their franchisees, and they do a good job. What mistakes with messaging, Nick?
Yeah, so it's still here. Like here's his strategy for what is he going to do for the year. What are his plans? This is important from a transparency standpoint. Be transparent with your messaging. Like these brands, I hate these calls. They're like, hey, I got some bad reviews online. Can we hide them? No. You should put a counterpoint of view on them. You can't hide them. It's part of your story. Even Google us. You'll find plenty of bad crap on their Glassdoor reviews of where people disagreed with our model. But it's interesting. I'll use our own example for this. You Google us and you look at some of our Glassdoor reviews on us being a pitch farm. All right, well, what is our mistake? We selected the wrong franchisee in that. We should have been more careful about our hiring. But the reality, I'm like, yeah, okay, call us a pitch farm. I'm trying to get the most impactful press for my clients, and they are tough brands to get press for. It's not like I'm working with the biggest brands in the world. I'm trying to help these emerging brands grow. All right, call us a pitch farm. So then what can I put as a counter view? Well, here's the reason why we pitch as heavily as we do. We're trying to disrupt the media. We don't want to call them and say, hey, have you seen that press release we sent you? And the media is like, nah, I get 500 emails a day. We're disrupting things. So there are bad points of view on there. I'm not trying to hide it. I'm just trying to provide a counter view. So that all wraps under be transparent with your message. It's important.
And then your next mistake is, I mean, again, we've talked about cheap and how much to spend. I mean, but I guess the point here is if you underinvest in franchise, and again, if you're about to franchise, you need to understand that whatever you pay franchise developers, franchise lawyers, that's really the tip of the iceberg in terms of investing. But what do you mean by a mistake in terms of going cheap?
The cheap route is the one they're like, hey, can I do this website for $5,000? You can. There's a column you should read it. It's on 1851, but it's a great image that was online. Can you do this cheaper? And it's like a beautiful picture of a horse on the first half of it, and then it's hand drawn, and the horse is all crooked in the second half. I mean, that's it. Yes, the answer is you can go the cheap route, but it might not give you the outcome. It might still be a horse in the end, but it's not going to be the horse that you expected. That even those brands that have the greatest bandwidth, they're still going to have to invest in this, because the reality is your competitor in franchising is not just, for Dairy Queen, it's not just other ice cream brands. It's anyone that has a similar investment, similar size. Oh, wait, nope, emerging brands too. Oh, wait, not just restaurant brands. It's anybody that has financially qualified bandwidth. So when you start breaking down who is a qualified and ready to buy lead, you're competing against everyone for that. If you take the cheap route, then expect the cheap return. It's like you hear the saying all the time, even when we're intercepting brands from other agencies, they're like, I guess you get what you pay for. Yeah, you do.
And I worry about the most is the opportunity cost. I mean, you know how much money you saved or didn't save, but it's very hard to quantify the lost opportunity. And, and the reset that has to happen later on. So we've been talking about moving the needle, right? In terms of leveraging PR, digital, just some examples here, Nick. I think we have here Smoothie King, Checkers, Mosquito Joe, Gym Guys. If you could do a quick hit for us in terms of, what you see and how they move the needle, or what brands should be focused on.
Yeah, so Smoothie King comes to us, they're stalled. It happens to the best brands in the world. What did we do? Rallied around the CEO, made sure that we could put people first. We elevated their franchisees and their stories to make sure it was humanized, put measurements in place to start determining what is success. That can be done just in simple Google Analytics to track conversions so that you could at least start getting some sort of mindset of what is winning. We organize a sales process. What happens when a lead comes in? Who's the one that calls them? What are the slides that you give them? And then we increase the depth of the web footprint so that around the web, you could find all the reasons why not to buy a Smoothie King. You could find a reason why to buy a Smoothie King so that we can put that counter content. What I'm showing you here is this wasn't brain surgery. This is just, again, the fundamentals. I've already said it, but same thing. They came to us. They were a stalled brand. We put the process in place under an awesome chief development officer who ends up retiring and hands off the keys to someone else. But he said, you guys tell us what to do here. They put it in action. It worked.
And then Checkers?
Humanizing the brand for Checkers. Checkers, here's a brand, they go up to 1,000 units, they decrease, and now they're back on the climb. To get back on the climb, that when you're on the decline, you're getting grease on your brand. Validation is going down. When franchisees are closing and you can go validate through people that close their Checkers or rallies, that was a bad situation. So then we had to rally around franchisees, rally around the CEO, make sure that we're putting the right lead gen budgets in place, making sure there's positive content, making sure we're celebrating every time we sign a new unit, celebrate the openings, and then it takes back off. So even if you get into a tough spot, you can rebound from it. Mojo, when we started with them, they only had one unit. This is a great case study. You want to know how to do it right as an emerging brand. Low franchise fee. They handle the marketing for their franchisees. Franchisees had to pay for that, but that was part of the agreement, not just like some passive, you're going to spend 5% of your every dollar on marketing yourself, but we're not going to audit it. No, they actually put the model in place. They started building momentum, invested in those first 10 franchisees, had a great leadership team, then started going down the broker channel, started adding units, and then they were prepped for when Zika and West Nile hit so that they could take off. So great case study of a brand that has done it well, that if you're an emerging brand, I would look at their case study. It doesn't matter what the widget is. And here, the Gym Guys one I think is important because here's one where maybe he didn't come to the table with all the capital in the world, but he was a hustler. So hustling can offset lack of capital. So understand that you don't have to necessarily come to the table with all the operating capital that I'm suggesting you should come if you're willing to be a hustler. But being a hustler means you are dialed into this thing. There are no weekends. It is merged dedication, commitment to the brand. That's what their CEO founder did. He took the route of, I'm going to be the reason this thing goes. I'm not going to sleep until it goes. You can see it on his Instagram now. The guy's crazy. It's always him at 4:30 in the morning working out. I mean, he is insane, but that insanity offsets the cost to get involved.
The right founder makes a big difference in whether a brand is going to grow. And just from the outside looking in, you know, he's a person I definitely admire in terms of everything you've said. The guy works hard. And he's a great example of, and he's got a great brand and great system, but I challenge, if he had a lesser brand and a lesser system, he'd still outperform the better brand just because who he is. So, and I do think for especially the startup and emerging brands, you're not going to win at franchising unless you immerse yourself in the franchise world. And you as the founder, you know, it's funny, franchise consultants, franchise lawyers, when a brand does well, they say it's because of them. When a brand doesn't do well, they blame the founder. And the reality is it's the founder and the management team. And that's what makes all that difference. 4 important takeaways for anyone who's been on this, 4 critical takeaways, how you'd sum this up.
Okay, so 1, franchising is not easy. Get that out of your head. You don't just pop on the lights and you sell franchises. So understand that when you're going into it. 2, figure out a way to get the financial capital to make sure you have a shot at growing. If you don't get that capital backing from the beginning, it's going to make it more challenging. So find access to that, even if you have to beg, borrow, and steal to get some capital to get those first 10 franchisees in. Don't overlook it. Franchisee success is so critical to what you're going to be able to accomplish as a franchisor. If you're not invested in the success of your franchisees, or you're taking that approach like, I'm going to sue them, you're not going to be a good franchisor. So go ahead and stick around, but you're going to be gone soon. So sorry, that's the way that goes. And 4, I said it's hard, but there are right resources. Just cut the deck on what you're using as a resource. There are plenty of vendors or suppliers that will happily take your money. Make sure you cut the deck. Don't trust some big shot that comes to you and says, I'm going to get you 1,000 units, because good luck finding any brand that went from 0 to 1,000 units fast. It's always slow and methodical.
We have a ton of people on this webinar and a ton that know you, but they could check you out at 1851 Franchise. And we've had a ton of good comments along the way on our chat. So here's a question, Nick. Knowing your customer, identifying those profiles to focus your energies, this is what everyone's talking about of late, but for emerging brands who have less than 10 franchisees, what's the route to early identification? I think this is an awesome question, actually.
It's you, the founder. That's the reality. That's where you pull out your own human interest story. You were a VP in a company and you got you overlooked for the C-suite. Well, then you have a persona to target. You can target those who are in VP or middle management level that got overlooked for a promotion. So you create content about that journey and what made you start this thing. You start looking at the reasons why did you even create this business? What was the gap in the marketplace you were creating? That could create another persona. So the reality is you can create things based on what your own story is. You can also create personas that you feel you want to target in the beginning. You might say you're an auto repair shop. You're going to target managers of auto repair shops. You might say, I want to target teachers because they're off in the summer and I feel like they would like to work on cars. Whatever your persona is that you feel you can target them. And you don't, I would say the ideal is you build campaigns around at least 5, but you don't have to. You could start with 1. It just gives you a starting point. So the story is there. As long as there's one human being involved, you already have a persona that you can duplicate.
So, but, because this is interesting because especially at the, a 10-unit franchise system, an emerging franchise system. So I would challenge the person that asked the question, right? Also, which is, if I asked you, what are those three unique aspects of your franchise system? What are they, right? Because I feel like there's so many brands that don't have that why built into their franchise offering. And I feel like founders like this, conversations like you have with your clients, when they understand that this is about their story, that sort of unlocks a lot of their focus and how they identify their prospective franchisees and target them. But what would be, so if I'm a brand and in this case, I have 10 franchisees, are there questions you could ask me that I could answer, and based on my answer, I would know, or I would understand whether or not I really have my why down and have really evaluated my brand? Like, how would I know, Nick? I sold 10 franchises. I think it's great. It's an XYZ franchise. We do this. Like, what should I reflect on to really, or what do I need to answer and know if I really drilled down on the essence of my brand?
Yes, we got 10 units. I mean, I just did this exercise with a brand that has a large size. I want to see, do they know what their vision or their why is? I said, all right, 1, 2, 3, go ahead and tell me a single sentence of what your brand is. And it's like, brrr. I'm like, guys, this is the leadership team. You guys don't speak the same language? You think your franchisees don't understand your why? And they're like, I get it. So if I'm a franchisor, I have 10 units, I'm probably hosting a conference call with my franchisees. I'm saying, give one single sentence on what our brand is from a why standpoint, go. And when they all sound like a broken record, screeching, and like 20 records playing at the same time, all that together, you got some work to do.
Well, it was interesting because we at IFA, we sat down and, we go through our strategic planning processes and our story brand processes. And you hit me with these questions and I took a step backwards, right? Because you think you understand your brand completely and, you really don't. And we focus on core values and all that, but it really takes reflection. So, again, I think those are good points. And someone asked your company, but I guess, Nick, the best place to find you guys is 1851franchise.com.
Yeah, that or No Limit, nolimitagency.com.
Okay.
If you want to have some fun, go look at my Instagram handle at NPowills.
Okay, Nick, I really appreciate it. And for everyone on the webinar, we'll make the video available. I know a number of people asked about that, but Nick, I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Appreciate it from you too. Thanks, dude.
Hey, have a good day, man.